Well, there's a lot of aspects to managing your classroom and facilitating good discussions and that kind of thing that are an important part of the psychology classroom. But I think for a novice teacher, if you start to talk to those who've taught psychology for a while, one of the things you're likely to hear is that the course it's not a stand and deliver kind of thing. What we find is that students learn and retain the information longer, learn more and retain information longer when the content is connected to some kind of active learning demonstration or hands-on kind of activity that really helps to bring that content alive. So what I would say is, yes, it's important for you to explain and to have discussions in class, but I would say it's more important to engage students in these activities that are connected to the science, that in many ways are helping the students live the content that you're trying to get across from whatever chapter it is you're covering. And if you're challenged on the content, one of the things we have going for us in psychology is we've got the science on our side. Challenge away. Let's talk about it. Let's address the concerns that you have about whatever data set we're looking at. And then let's fall back on some of the skills we've been learning. Have other people done this too? Have we been able to corroborate this information? Are there contextual things that you're concerned about? And I get that. I mean, there was a time when most of the research that was in the textbooks, not now, but most of the research in the textbooks reflected experiments that were done on first and second year college students, mostly males, mostly white. That's not the case now. The problem with that research, of course, is that it was being applied to entire populations of much older people, much more diverse populations. That was recognized, and that's been corrected now, and you can't get away with that sort of thing. And that's where the science comes in, because the science is our protector and our shield in terms of saying this is why we believe this tendency to be true. And now, what are the implications of that tendency, and how might that impact your thinking and your behavior?
Classroom management. You'll never master it entirely. Students will try your patience. Some of us may lose our temper occasionally, but you can make it better. And that involves, I think, a lot of things. A trick I learned not early enough was to own the entire classroom space. When I started teaching in a traditional classroom with rows of desks out in front of me, I had this strong tendency to pace back and forth in the space between the front row and what was then a chalkboard, and often stood behind my desk. And I realized one day that rarely did I cross that line to where the student desks were. And because of that, a lot of stuff was happening back there that I wasn't fully aware of. And I learned quickly to roam farther, and sometimes talk from different parts of the classroom. I'd stand in the back. I'd stop to look out the window. I'd move to the side. I'd walk up and down the rows. If a student had something out they shouldn't have had out, I would simply take it out of their hand and put it. I wouldn't say anything. I would just move it to the side to try to own that space better than I might have otherwise. A big part of classroom management is to make them realize that class time is valuable. And I always worked as hard as I could to make class time valuable. I started on time. I finished on time, not early. I found a way to fill the classroom to the end of the class period. I figured if I thought I could waste class time, students would see that, and they would model that behavior, and they would waste class time too. It's not important to be here. Early on, a student in one of your classes will probably ask, do we have to do this? Why do we have to do this? And I would stop and take out a little exercise that I had pre-prepared, where I began by asking students to estimate the annual budget in my school districts. and my figures were very old, but students have no idea how much your school district spends. And I'd even tell them this would include building maintenance, this would include supplies and textbooks, this would include janitorial services and administration and teacher salaries. And they would guess for a district in my community where we had 5,000 students, they'd say, $800,000? $2 million? Rarely would a student come close to what it was, which was tens of millions of dollars back when I started this. So we would establish that. This doesn't take very long. And then I would start dividing. Let's say half of that money goes for secondary schools. And let's say in the secondary schools, half goes to the middle schools and half goes to the high school. And let's say we have this many students in the high school. What's the per student allocation? And then I would say, well, the typical class load, we had a traditional schedule, was, students would take 5 or 6 classes. And I'd start dividing into that original budget figure until we calculated together as a class what the cost of an admission ticket would be. If you had to buy a ticket to class the way you had to buy a ticket to go to the movies, how much would that ticket cost? And when I was doing this exercise, it was $8 or $9 per class period per student to attend my class. And that's a real eye-opener for students. First of all, you can talk about where that money comes from, that somebody has paid that money so you could have the opportunity to be here right now, right here, to learn something. And if you want to get global about it, talk about the number of students who don't have that opportunity, who live in places where that's simply not possible for economic or political reasons, that they don't have the chance for that education. And when you do this, you'll often have students come in the next day and they'll say something like, boy, sure didn't get my money's worth in algebra this morning. And they begin to see it and appreciate it. And that begins to kind of enhance this. If a student would ask me when I scheduled a test, oh man, there's a volleyball meet the night before. Can't we delay that test? I'd say, well, I'll make a deal with you. Talk to the volleyball coach. If you can get the volleyball coach to delay the volleyball match this time, I'll delay my test next time. And they look at you like you're crazy. Why would you ever suggest such a thing? The volleyball match is important. Oh, well, I thought that was an extracurricular activity. We have a curricular activity. And the whole idea, I used a lot of athletic analogies. 2-a-days for football are not fun, but football players would go and they would happily do that because of the expected payoff months down the road. You're going to have to put some effort into this. The more effort you put into this, the more you're going to get out of it. So I wanted students to understand the value of the time we spent together. Teaching is performance. It took me a long time to realize that. You're on stage. Even if it's group activities, you're still on stage. You can command their attention the way an actor commands attention. You can do things to bring the class alive, to make the activities more important. It's fun to work on these skills. You could sometimes see yourself getting better from second period to third period to fourth period as you learn how much timing matters, how much volume matters, how much you phrase a question matters. Those are really fun things to think about. You may live in a district that discourages lecture. You may even live in a district that prohibits lecture. I think that's wrong. I don't think we should get rid of lectures. I think we should get rid of bad lectures. There's a big difference. A good lecture is a wonderful thing. Think of TED Talks. People like TED Talks. They'll voluntarily put their time in to do TED Talks. There are very few props. There may be a few images on a screen, but it's not something that has a lot of entertaining props along with it. It's someone talking to you that they've rehearsed and carefully prepared. That's what your class should be like. That's what your lecture should be like. And keep kids involved and active. Do it by asking questions. They have to interact if you ask a question. And if it's something they have to take notes on, don't put all your notes on a PowerPoint slide because they'll just mindlessly copy them down. Put the topics on the slide, and then they have to listen to you to determine what they have to write down. Some of you use guided note type things, and those are great techniques, but you need to get your students actively involved. If you do that and convince them of the value of the time you spend together, most of your classroom management issues will fall by the wayside.